Hey, this is Josh, and today we're explaining how the world ends, according to Nostradamus. Born at the beginning of the 16th century, Michel de Nostradamus, better known as Nostradamus, lived in an age of constant war and disease. The bubonic plague killed his first wife and 2 young children. At the time, he was working as an apothecary, selling plague remedies, which can't have been any good. So he turned to his other great love, astrology, predicting marriages, outbreaks of disease, usurpers of the European thrones, you name it, he saw it. Some called him evil, others said he was mad. In an era where claiming visions could get you tortured or executed, that mattered. But with Catherine de' Medici, wife of King Henry II of France, as one of his clients, his head remained firmly attached to his shoulders. In an era where death came without warning, demand for his supposed psychic powers and horoscopes made him a favorite of the French nobility. But he didn't stop at predicting the next month or just a few years down the line. Depending on how you read his works, he might have envisioned everything from Adolf Hitler to 9/11 to JFK's unfortunate day in Dallas. And that is where things start to get uncomfortable. It goes without saying that the Catholic Church wasn't his biggest fan, but with a royal endorsement, he was effectively untouchable, even after he might have predicted the king's very grisly death. On June 20, 1559, King Henry was on top of the world. He'd recently signed a peace treaty with his enemies, the Habsburgs of Austria, and his daughter Elizabeth had gotten married to King Philip II of Spain. To celebrate, he staged a weekend of jousting, with himself as the star attraction. Wearing the colors of his mistress, the 40-year-old king rode headlong into combat against a much younger soldier, and he immediately regretted it. The soldier's lance shattered and a piece of wood splintered off and pierced Henry's eye and brain. The injury became infected, spread into his brain, and Henry died in agony from sepsis 10 days later. 10 days. Had Nostradamus predicted it? One of his quatrains, a short 4-line prophecy, warned that a young lion will overcome an older one. Sure, he said it would be on a field of combat, not in a joust, but that is close enough. But the best part is that Nostradamus predicted that the young soldier would pierce the older man's eyes through a golden cage, maybe armor. He also said that 2 wounds made 1. Eye and brain equals sepsis. He called it a cruel death, and 10 days in agony certainly is. Convincing? Maybe. Coincidence? Possibly. But we are just getting started. Nostradamus might have predicted the 1572 St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, when Paris was effectively turned into a killing field. Thousands were murdered in the streets and their homes. Up to 30,000 could have been killed in total after all the fighting spread out of the city. These were the days of the French Wars of Religion, the Catholics versus the Protestant Huguenots. On the day it all kicked off, Paris was packed with Protestant nobles attending the wedding of Catherine de' Medici's daughter, Marguerite, to the Protestant King Henry of Navarre. What started as targeted assassinations of Huguenot leaders quickly spiraled into mass slaughter, and word on the street was that Queen Catherine was behind it all. Again, Nostradamus might have predicted it. He wrote of a great city plunged into sudden confusion. Check. Nighttime slaughter, the innocent struck down. Check. The royal power will be blamed. Double check. And faith betrayed. Check. Now that's a lot of boxes ticked for one massacre. The one thing he didn't see was that one of the Protestants who survived the massacre was Gabriel de Montgomery, a Scottish-French nobleman. This was the soldier, now much older, who had injured and effectively killed King Henry in the joust. Nostradamus didn't make that connection, nor that de Montgomery eventually lost his head. Okay, so if Nostradamus was any good at his job, what massive event in Europe would he have predicted? Here's a clue. The Enlightenment, heads on pikes, angry, bread-deprived peasants. That's right, the French Revolution. It wasn't the death of a king, it was the collapse of an entire system. 10 years of mayhem and madness and political change that started with the storming of the Bastille in 1789. Nostradamus might have well seen it in his visions. Here's the quatrain. From the enslaved populace, songs, chants, and demands, while princes and lords are held captive in prisons. These will in the future be taken as divine prayers by headless idiots. Enslaved peasants and Enlightenment intellectuals certainly like to sing songs. La Marseillaise was one of their favorites. As for chants, the revolution was full of them. And as for princes and lords in prisons, the jails were bursting with nobility. As for headless idiots, it might have been a scathing critique of the revolution's chaos, where collective madness took hold and many revolutionaries quite literally lost their heads. And who emerged through the smoke of the revolution? Napoleon, of course. So what did Nostradamus have to say about him? Quite a lot, it turns out. He wrote, "Ho, Nea, Loron, will be more of fire than blood. He will roam the seas in praise, refusing the crown. You don't need to play with the letters Po Naya Loron for long to get something close to Napoleon. Napoleon did indeed become a great leader, but it wasn't his bloodline that made him top dog. It was his fire. Roaming the seas was his forte, and absolutely he refused the crown. There were plenty of monarchists during Napoleon's reign biding their time, but while he was busy turning foreign armies to dust, they could only stand back in fear as Napoleon received praise from his people. But there was more. Nostradamus also talked about an emperor will be born near Italy who will cost the empire dearly. Napoleon was born in Corsica, an island off the coast of Italy. It might have been annexed by France, but culturally it was Italian. Did Napoleon cost the empire dearly? Well, his military sojourns around Europe cost millions of lives and a lot of cash. Some argue that his conquests ultimately hurt France's geopolitical position as a superpower, but we'll let you decide that. Just so you know, Nostradamus never claimed to be a mystic. Educated in math and astrology, he said that he was merely a learned interpreter of celestial patterns, not a sorcerer. He called it Judicial astrology. In an era that burned accused witches and believed that some villagers flew on broomsticks, openly claiming visions from another realm could have left him crushed in Spanish boots or having his toes held to the flames. And that's the reason he could get away with his next vision. He wrote, "The kingdoms will be shaken by sudden uprising. The people will overthrow ancient rule. Law will fail, order broken, and the great will fall from their seats." This should be pretty straightforward. The French Revolution didn't just change the lay of the land in France. It had repercussions far and wide. The old order had been kings and queens that ruled over peasants who didn't get much say in, well, anything. Their sudden uprising did overthrow the ancient rule, while law and order broke down. The Enlightenment, with its focus on the rights of men, changed the face of the entire Western world. All over Europe, in the German states, Austria, and Italy, in what would become the USA, revolutions exploded. The great leaders did indeed fall from their seats. But revolution wasn't the only force reshaping the world. Technology. Peasants flooded into the cities, where machines began producing goods faster than ever before. This industrial revolution began in England and spread fast. Nostradamus might have been talking about the urban decay that followed when he wrote, "The poor man's cry will go unheard, while the rich will grow harder still. Cities will be filled with lamentation, and order will fail." The poor suffered and the rich grew colder toward the new working class. Cities swelled into slums and unrest followed. In another quatrain, Nostradamus talked about cities being filled with the scourges of famine within the plague, and people put out by steel. Was he seeing outbreaks of smallpox, typhus, and tuberculosis? And were the people put out by steel the deadly crackdowns on protesters? Then the industrial powers went to war and they brought their machines with them. So, did Nostradamus predict World War I? He talked about wars stirred up anew, saying after a period of peace there would be battles in the sky. Could that mean the airplanes, something that no one had ever fought with before? But he added to that, noise, song, battle, fighting in the sky perceived, and one will hear brute beasts talking. Fighting in the sky, the beasts talking, was maybe the sound of guns. When Nostradamus was alive, no one fought in the sky. He also wrote that the world shrinks, and with airplanes it did. Another part of the quatrain talks about a pig half man. A pilot wearing a mask would have looked exactly like that. Okay, Adolf Hitler. Now there's a guy who certainly left a mark on history. Did Nostradamus envisage a small man with a questionable mustache who tried to take over half of the world? Kind of. He talked about a young child who would be born of poor people. Hitler's parents both came from the peasantry, but they weren't poor when Adolf was born. The father, Alois Hitler, was a middle-level customs official, and he provided a stable life for his wife Clara and Hitler's 7 siblings, 4 who died very young and 2 were half-siblings. So the Hitlers weren't exactly scraping by, but they did come from poverty. Nostradamus went on, saying this child would one day seduce a great troop by his tongue. Hitler was many things, but he was a fantastic orator, and he absolutely seduced a nation of men to fight for him. Nostradamus also said, "This man will be born in Western Europe," and quote, "his fame will increase toward the realm of the East." Ask anyone in Russia or anywhere east of Germany if they have heard of Hitler, and the answer is an immediate yes. He was massive in the East, infamous rather than famous, but let's not get so hung up on semantics. Nostradamus also saw beasts ferocious with hunger that will cross the rivers. That could be planes, tanks, or even ships. Nostradamus might have envisioned the battle on the Eastern Front because he wrote that the greater part of the battlefield will be against Ister. Now that sounds a lot like Hitler. We can't really fault a visionary for his spelling. Staying with the early 20th century, there was another major event that killed off humans. No weapons, no madcap idealists, nature did it all by itself. Nostradamus wrote, "After a great war, a greater pestilence, no remedy, bodies struck without sign, cities left deserted, death walking unseen." This might be referring to the Spanish flu. Maybe 50 to 100 million dead globally. No one can be sure of the numbers, but this greater pestilence likely killed more people than the 9 to 11 million soldiers and 6 to 13 million civilians who died during World War I. No remedy? Bodies struck without sign? Maybe he meant the invisibility of an airborne virus. As for cities left deserted, Nostradamus hit the nail firmly on the head. News reports from the US talked about cities under quarantine where the streets were empty. Saskatoon, Canada was described as a city of the dead, a ghost town as everyone stayed home. And the death walking unseen could have been referring to people wearing masks or being very ill and not yet showing symptoms. Another major event from the early 20th century is 2 Japanese cities being annihilated by American bombs. Did Nostradamus see nukes in his visions? One of his quatrains does sound a little bit like destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It says, "Near the gates and within 2 cities, there will be 2 scourges, the like of which was never seen. Famine within plague, people put out by steel, crying to the great immortal God for relief. 2 cities scourged, the like of which was never seen." Seems pretty obvious. Famine and plague might be the radiation poisoning that the US at first denied existed. The steel could be related to the B-29 bombers that dropped the bombs. As for relief, well, the people certainly did cry out for it, but their government was slow to help. Then we have the day many Americans said their country lost their innocence, when darkness descended after a relatively stable 1950s, the day President John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Nostradamus wrote, "The ancient task will be completed. From on high evil will fall on the great man. A dead innocent will be accused of the deed. The guilty will remain in the mist." Ancient task? Assassinating political leaders has been around forever. From high and evil, well, that could mean the invisible hands many Americans believe arranged the assassination. But the best part of this prediction is the dead innocent being accused of the deed. For conspiracy theorist Lee Harvey Oswald, who was murdered after he was arrested, was innocent. And if the skeptics are right, the guilty did remain in the mist. They were never officially charged. Now we come to the modern age, and the day 2 planes flew into the Twin Towers as the world watched in a state of absolute shock. Nostradamus might have seen it in the stars when he wrote, "The sky will burn at 45 degrees. Fire approaches the great new city. By fire, he will destroy their city. A cold and cruel heart, blood will pour. Mercy to none." Fire in a great new city is obvious. Compared to other major global cities, New York is still a baby. What's more is it lies close to the 45th parallel, about 300 miles away, but we can forgive Nostradamus for that error. It wasn't completely destroyed, not even close, but Nostradamus was right about the cold and cruel hearts, the blood, and the lack of mercy. He might have also seen World War III. One of his quatrains talks about combat and naval battle. He explained, "The red adversary will become pale with fear, putting the great ocean in dread." Red adversary? Is that China? Was the Great Ocean in dread related to the fight in the South China Sea where China has been building bases? He's also talked about a great swarm of bees in the fight, which could be the drones used by World War III. The next big war will no doubt be a war of machines more than humans. But one of his best lines is, "3 fires rise from the eastern sides, while the west loses its light in silence." 3 fires from the east. Western media these days likes to talk about a new axis: China, Russia, and Iran. And for years now, political scientists have discussed the new multipolar world where the US is no longer the only great superpower, so maybe Nostradamus was right about the West losing its light. He seemed to think the world would end, writing in another quatrain that on the 7th month of 1999, a great king of terror would fall from the sky. Unless he meant the rain in the UK. No great terror fell from the sky that year. The world didn't end, but maybe he was right when he said that Mars would rule the world, meaning constant war. But let's soften the blow. The truth is, Nostradamus' grim predictions can be read in countless ways. It's not that he perfectly foresaw the future. It's that human history is so full of war, famine, and catastrophe that his prophecies can be made to fit almost anything. And even if you do believe him, there is some good news. His 26th quatrains, which might relate to the year 2026, don't just talk about a swarm of bees attacking by night and the rising of the east as the west loses its light. He also says, "Shadows will fall, but the man of light will rise. and the stars will guide those who look within. We'll leave that one up to you. Now go check out the events that will cause the end of the world, or click on this video instead.